What is up, everybody? How's it going? Hopefully, you guys are doing well. So, guys, today I wanted to make a long video that I've been meaning to make for a long time, and that is my opinions, thoughts, and whole adventure through God of War Ragnarok. I absolutely love this game. It is one of my favorite games of all time. I recently just uploaded my another playthrough of the ending because I just truly love it, and we'll get to the ending later. But I'm gonna go through every mission and talk about like what I liked, what surprised me, what I thought was really cool, what was challenging, and just talk about just the playthrough. So if you guys haven't played God of War Ragnarok, please click off this video, or if you don't mind spoilers, keep watching. So I'm going to go throughout every single mission from beginning to end and just talk about what I liked and just my thoughts throughout my whole playthrough and everything. And since I didn't really have a voiceover or a camera to record my regular playthrough, I'm just going to talk my opinions through this. I haven't done this before, so let's get into it. So you first start off with God of War Ragnarok with Kratos in the cave and Atreus coming from behind him. And I never saw any gameplay footage or anything like this of the game, so I was really surprised Atreus had a deeper voice. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's actually grown up. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? So that's what first surprised me. And then you had the whole chase with Freya. And that was kind of surprising too, but also not, because I was also at the end of the original God of War 2018 game. Kratos killed what's his name, Balder, and so she will never be able to forgive him. And I knew she was going to fight out in war, and that's exactly what happened here. I just didn't know how it would play out. And that's exactly what happened. They went straight to the stave, and it was so cool to see the fight between them, of how she stabbed Kratos, of how Atreus was like, oh, I don't want to shoot you, but I will. And luckily he didn't. But they got to the stave, and basically they were safe there. And once that happens, you had the whole Fenrir situation where he died. I wasn't really connected with that because I didn't really know him yet. But it is a call to God, Thor Ragnarok, and how Hela had the dog of Fenrir, and they were side by side. And so maybe there's something more to that, but I wasn't really, wasn't really connected and attached to that yet. And so as time goes along, you go in to find Atreus because he ran off while you, or when you were playing Kratos, was sleeping, and you find out that you're going to fight a bear, and he actually was Atreus. And I'm like, what the heck? When he turned back from bear to Atreus, I'm like, oh my gosh, they hinted at this at God of War 2018 version, but now you're fully realizing that Atreus can actually turn into an animal. And so it's kind of cool seeing that, and the differences between him in human form versus the bear form. And so I'll get to that much later too. But we basically get to the bear, and then after that, so I'm scrolling through the playthrough to figure out what's next. You get back to the cabin, and this is like one of my favorite scenes of all time in this game. It's where they left off at the very end of 2018, where Thor came to the house. And like, yes, finally, we get to see what happens next. And I was salivating over the whole thing because I'm like, this is crazy. He is actually talking to Thor. Odin comes in, they start talking. Basically, they don't come to an agreement, and then you immediately go into the Thor fight. It's so cool, the fight between Thor. You get to see all his powers. It was really cool seeing Thor and Odin too, because again, I didn't see any gameplay or footage or spoilers. I think I saw like a screenshot of their faces, so I wasn't that surprised, but it was cool just seeing them in action, especially of all the talk in 2018 when it was like on the statue, hey Thor, you dauber. So it was cool just to see him in person. So anyways, you get to the fight. It's a really cool fight. The one moment I can't forget in that fight was when he got hit by the hammer, and you're tapping that button and you're trying to defend it, and then it just knocks you out either way, and you're like, wait, what? was I pressing hard enough? What's going on? And then I'd never seen this in a video game before. He immediately revives him and is like, nope, the fight's not over until I see the real you. And so that's exactly what happened. It's such a cool fight. And then after the fight, they went back to the house, and then Loki, or Atreus, goes through the old temple and shows him basically a vision of the giants, and I thought that was kind of cool. And I'll get more into the visions later because you'll get more into that, but it's kind of cool. So then you go in to a quest for Tyr because Atreus was looking for him, and so it's kind of cool seeing all that because they go on their way to Svartalheim, and this has to be, I want to say, my second favorite realm out of the whole entire game, and we'll get to other realms later. But it's so cool seeing this because you first go through a boat through some of the swamp area. That's the best way I can call it. I think the official name is the wetlands. And you go through that, and you continue, and then you finally get to the village of the dwarves. And this was kind of interesting because when you got there, it wasn't like, oh, yay, welcome. It's like, nope, everyone's hiding. It's like everyone's trying to avoid you. And I thought that was kind of an interesting detail. Sorry, a notification just popped up. But it's kind of cool that they avoided you. And eventually I learned that Odin was actually disguised as one of them and spit in the lake as one of the dwarves just to spit in their faces, you know? Anyways, you get to meet, you go along, and you find out that one of the captains of the dwarves basically gave away, what's his name? With Tyr's location. And eventually later you'll find that Tyr is actually Odin. But it's cool seeing Tyr, the actual vision of him when I first saw him, because I'm like, no way. This is so cool that I get to actually meet Tyr for once, see what he looks like, because I just had visions and didn't really actually see him in his face, you know? So it's kind of cool that they actually put that. And so you keep on going up the mountain and fighting different areas and defeating different bosses. Eventually you find them. And then you go back and you eventually get back to Midgard. But there's other side content in Svartalheim that was cool, that you can explore the different mines and free a giant, I think it was like whale or something like that. And it was cool just to see that. But otherwise, yeah, the mines were good. I really loved seeing inside the mines. It wasn't my favorite. There's a lot of puzzles and stuff like that. But it was cool, but it felt like I was trapped trying to rescue Tyr. That's all I can say about the mines as you travel up the mountain and go inside it. And so after that, you keep on going to the mission, and let me see what's next. You get Tyr. Oh yeah, during that time, I forgot to say at the beginning of the mission, you go inside of one of my favorite places in the game to always visit, and that is the house. What is it? The dwarf's house, you know. But basically, you're inside, and it's so beautiful. It's stars, it's blue, it's gold everywhere. It's so cool just to see it all. And I'm like, this is really good imagery right here in terms of the house. And it's so cool just visiting there and just be like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But yeah, it's really cool just doing that. Anyways, as you get Tyr, you keep on going along. I'm trying to figure out what you do after that. Give me a second. I know you go. Let me see. Oh, I think you had to go. Oh yeah. Basically, you had to get Sindri's help and go to Freya, because she's very distraught and everything. So basically, you play as Atreus, and when I first played as Atreus, it was absolutely amazing. The gameplay is so well done. The combat is amazing. I love that you can literally just drop kick every enemy when it gets to its like build up of his special power or whatever. It's so cool seeing arrows. His movement is nice and fluid. He can literally just do wrestling moves on enemies. It was very different style of what I played from the first game. And I was like, this is crazy. I loved his combat because it was absolutely so different from Kratos. You have to think differently. You can't just go run and gun. You have to actually think about the moves that you're going to do and follow that within the enemies. So basically, you go to Freya, and then afterwards, you go back to the house, and let me see. I'm going to the next one. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah. And then basically you learned that you had to go to Alfheim and do something. I forgot what it was, but that one wasn't really my favorite mission, just because it was cool seeing the Temple of Light again, but I already saw it in the first game, and it just was a slog going through it all again. Especially post-game, it was like, oh gosh, I have to go all the way here, get back, activate this checkpoint, go all the way back here, activate this checkpoint. And basically it was very hard trying to get through all that because you fight with the Dark Elves this time, the Light Elves this time because they were peaceful in the first game, but now you're fighting on both ends. And it was kind of cool seeing that. But again, it was a slog trying to get through the whole temple. I didn't really remember much about that mission. I just remember it was just a fight between Light and Dark Elves, and you're just trying to get through it to the other side. And so basically we finished that mission. Let me see. And then you saw a vision at the end, and then you go home. And then once you go home, what's the next mission? Sorry, I don't remember this off the top of my head. And then after that, this is the mission, my favorite mission in the game, just because it was so beautiful, and you visit my favorite realm. And that is when Atreus, or Loki, goes and visits Ironwood. And it's really cool. And Ironwood is part of Jotunheim. And it was so beautiful seeing the golden colors everywhere. I know you did a mission where it's just basically Loki. You go and gather fruit, and you just go. There's some fighting stuff, but you go in and gather some stuff for Agraboda, which is a new friend. It was kind of interesting because this is a new character, so I didn't really know how to feel about her because she was very mysterious. I knew she was a giant because she's living in Jotunheim, but I didn't really know what the details of her meant. So I was going through along like, okay, she's a friend, she's good, she's helpful, but she's very lost. And basically throughout the mission, you eventually go visit, I think, her aunt or grandmother, I forgot which one, but it was kind of a cool mission because everything's giant, and you like have a giant cup that's like twice your size, and I'm just like, oh, hi. But basically, it's a really cool mission. Eventually, it's really cool to see the revival of Jormungandr and just the creation of it. It was very cool seeing that. And so I really liked that part at the end, before the fight. And then basically Atreus comes back after Ironwood, and they go into an argument with Kratos and Atreus, and they're like, where were you? Why can I trust you? And I thought that was a really cool scene just because it was a conversation between father and son, the tension between the first game and the second game. And you can't really trust Atreus at this point, but someone arrives on their doorstep, and I'm like, great, another Valkyrie. And I was kind of surprised, kind of not, because this was actually Freya in her Valkyrie form. It was really cool to see her in her Valkyrie form, but I wasn't expecting it. It wasn't too hard of a boss fight. I mean, it was very simple. And then once you got that, because you ended up being not friends with Freya, but rather just you ended up coming to peace in the short term because what they decided is that I think in the next mission, let me see, blah blah blah, yeah, is that they go to Vandenheim and they decide to rescue the bonds of Freya because it was just getting too much because she couldn't really go anywhere else. So she was in her bird farm half the time. Bird farm, sorry. Said that too fast. And it was kind of cool meeting the others in the camp. It was really cool callback to the first game where you got to meet the boar. And I didn't realize it was an actual person, but now I understand why Freya cared so much about it. I'm like, this is so cool. I finally got to meet this person. Finally got to meet the camp. Then you finally go on to rescue the bonds, tying her to Vanaheim. And throughout this, it was kind of like a bunch of fighting scenes, but I didn't mind because what was interesting about this whole trek was that Kratos actually told the stories of, I think, Calliope from Chains of Olympus. And it was so cool. I'm like, yes, finally, they brought a callback to Chains of Olympus. But also, what was more fascinating is that Kratos mentioned Deimos. And I'm like, no way. This is so cool. Going back to Ghost of Sparta, they brought back the references to the PSP games. I'm like, this is so cool. But basically, once you get to the bonds, you fight a huge boss called Nidhogg, and this was kind of a cool fight because it was a guy or an enemy that can open up realms and use it to its advantage, and so it was kind of a cool fight. It wasn't like a tremendously big boss, but it was like a cool boss. So basically, we free her, and then I think we get out of Vanaheim. And then once we do that, so I'm trying to think if anything else I'm missing. No, and then you return back to the house because you go on to the next mission. And the next mission, so basically it includes Vandenheim. Basically, I loved it. It was so beautiful, but it was at night, I think. So it was kind of hard like seeing all the references, but we'll get to Vandenheim later because there's another mission that does it. And so basically we turn to Midgard, and I'm trying to think of what we do next. Give me a second. Oh yeah. And so basically once you do that, you have another conversation with Atreus because he's not feeling right. He's doubting himself, and so basically he gets angry and runs away. And where does he go to? Yes, he goes to Asgard. And Asgard was a great mission. When you went there because it introduced a great new area, kind of like Earth in a way, where it's like very big open valleys and lakes and oceans, and it's very green. I was like, this is kind of cool. And so you meet the Midgardians and meet I forgot who that one kid's name, but you meet him. He was kind of like the cool side character. Didn't really care for him that much. He was a cool friend of Atreus, but he wasn't really interesting in the fact. But once you climbed the wall, it was cool climbing the wall because you just kept on going up and up and up and up, fighting enemies and enemies, and then you finally meet Heimdall. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. He's going to be just like the Marvel version. And I'm like, dude, you're kind of being a jerk right now. And that's basically his whole persona in the game. And I'm like, what the heck? This is so interesting that they made it so different from the Marvel version where he can literally just not care about anyone else. Anyways, he leads them to the Great Lodge, and basically they meet Odin. And the fight between Heimdall and Atreus was kind of funny. I didn't expect it. I knew after like the first 5 seconds of not hitting him, I'm like, okay, so this is how it's going to go. I'm just going to try to dodge and just try to hit, but it's going to be a time thing where it's like, well, after a minute, it'll finally activate the mission. So basically you go to Odin, and he gives you the mask, or parts of the mask to find more. And if I remember right, you go on a mission, and then you meet also Sif and Thor's daughter, and do that. So it was kind of interesting to meet them. But again, they have the mask. Okay, what's next? Next. Into the fire. Okay, so basically you had to recover the mask in Muspelheim with Thor. This was kind of a cool mission because it was like, oh, cool, I get to finally go with Thor on this cool mission. And it kind of was. It was kind of cool to see Thor and Atreus hate each other, but also work each other at the same time. They also saw a vision in Muspelheim from the giants. That was kind of interesting by itself because you kind of saw the lore behind that. But in the end, he finally got the mask. It wasn't too hard of a mission, and it wasn't very that interesting, but it was kind of interesting to see the difference between Thor and Atreus in that mission. And going on to the next mission, what's this one? Blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I'm thinking. Oh yeah, since Atreus escaped to Asgard, back on Midgard, they were like, you know what, Freya, come with me. And I'm speaking of Thor. I'm speaking of Kratos at this moment. Kratos and Freya were like, okay, let's go to the Norns, which are basically the people that can tell the future in a way. And so it was kind of a cool mission in a way. It was kind of hard getting there because you have to face visions and kind of face yourself, kind of like the end of God of War 1? Question mark? No, God of War 2. Sorry, God of War 2. And you have to do that. I think it was God of War 1, my bad. Anyways, so you go in and you meet the Norns because it was really cool where they lived. They lived under the sea, and it kind of reminded you of Finding Nemo in a way, of how they lived in kind of like anemone or seaweed. Totally different things, but has the same idea. But it was cool seeing the interaction, seeing that Kratos has not lost his way and will kill at whatever the cost to save his son. And so we'll get into that later. But basically, it was cool seeing that fate is fate. You can't change it, and therefore, it's going to happen regardless whether Kratos and Freya make the choices they do or not. And so that's kind of the end of the mission. Forging Destiny. That's the next mission I'm reading. And basically here, you go to Svartalheim, and I believe you create a weapon. And this is a weapon to use against Heimdall because he can't be hit. He can read the minds of others. And so it was kind of interesting that you get to go to Svartalheim again. You get to go in the cellars. And this was actually a very interesting mission. Very cool in a way. It wasn't my favorite scenery. But it was cool just to go and fight some enemies. Eventually, there was one puzzle I hated when I was going through the original story because I'm like, how the heck do I solve this puzzle? It's where you had to shut the water pipe on this to rise a gate up here. You go up here and go around, shut the water pipe again, and it raises back down. And it was very confusing, and I was like, oh, come on. It took me like 20, 30 minutes to even get past on my first playthrough. But anyways, we finally got to the place where you create the spear. And this is made of Draupnir, which is a ring that can replicate itself over and over and over again. And so basically you get to the Forge, which is kind of a cool place, very different, again, from the Marvel Universe. It's not in space. You don't have really a heater that can make things that way. Instead, you have a kind of a lake, a circular lake. And there's a person called a lady who is like, I want to say like a mermaid, and she can craft things just by moving. And this was kind of interesting because I remember when she was crafting the spear for him, it was really cool to see the symbol for God of War, where it goes like this, standing for the Greek pantheon, or basically the God of War. And so it was cool that from his blood they saw that, and I'm like, they had that as a reference. Anyways, basically, yeah, they create the weapon. Sorry, I'm trying to think. what else happened? Oh yeah, and throughout the game too, because there was a vision where um, Kratos and dang it, why am I blanking on the name of Atreus' mother? Um, I'll think about it in a second. Anyways, they have visions of her with Kratos, and I'm just like, finally, we get to see her face. And never, even on the first mission, I'm like, this is so cool. We finally get to see I think it's Faye. Faye is her name. There we go. And it's kind of finally cool to see Faye and who she was because we had heard all the stories in God of War 2018. I'm like, dang, they better bring in Faye in this game. And so it was really cool to see her face and everything about it because it just was so cool. Seeing the adventures they had between Kratos and her and just all the adventures they had together. And of course, I love the theme song of her in general. Bum 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 ba bum ba bum. Anyways, it goes something like that. It's very cool because it's the horn sound and it's very tense every time you hear that song because it makes you think of the woman she was and how good they were to the family and how she protected the family when Kratos was gone. Anyways, they created the spear, and basically what happened, blah, 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 let me see. They go to Helheim, and what were they there for? Oh, yeah. So basically it transfers back from Kratos to Atreus, and they go on another mission because they wanted to bring together the mask. Basically, this is the mask of Loki, basically peering into the answers of the universe. That's what they're forging. So anyways, they go to Helheim, and they try to find the mask. Something goes wrong where they release a giant dog, and he can open up tears. And this was kind of interesting mission. Not one of my favorites again. There's a lot of enemies to kill. Just a slog just to finally get to the end. Especially on post game because I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go all the way to the end to do this, all the way in to do that. But we finally did it. What was interesting is that once we freed the dog and actually killed it, it came back to life. And I'm like, what the heck? So we had to fight it again. But at the end was very interesting. Fenrir went into the dog and possessed him, and I'm like, no way. So this is how the story of Fenrir, and I'm like, now I get it. And it just shocked me my first time. I'm like, this is the mission where Fenrir, it's the birth of Fenrir. They also had a callback to the giant bird. I think it's Hasvagvir or something like that. Forgot the actual name, but you get to meet him literally in person because it was like we're ending in the mission, but instead you go right and around and you stare up and you're like, wow, this is so cool. Before in the 2018 version, you only got a glimpse of him because you had to fight a bunch of enemies on the boat, and because when you're circling a lake, he was up on a perch above, and you're like, oh, hi, this is so cool, but you can't really interact with him. So anyways, you get to the end, and you finally get the mask, and you return back, and going to the end, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so you get Fenrir, and he's now a friend. And so that was really cool. So I'm seeing what's next. And so it's basically go back to Fenrir, or the Freya's camp and see what's next. And basically, since you create the spear, because at the time, at the end of Helheim, so I'm trying to think if I'm doing this right. Yeah, so you do that. Because, there's also a mission, right, where you had to free the dog, but also, because the dog opened up tears, basically Kratos and Atreus had to go end the dog and put Fenrir in. So basically that's the whole story. Anyways, they go back to Vanaheim and they reunite and figure out what to do next. let me see what's next. Oh yeah, and basically this was one of my favorite scenes in the game. You finally get to meet Skull and Hati, literally the dogs, because you have to rescue the moon. So you have to go throughout Vanaheim, fight a bunch of enemies, finally get the moon for them to chase because someone stole it. But anyways, you get to meet Skull and Hati, and it was so cool. Literally, the ledge they're on, the view that you get is so amazing. I'm just like, this is absolutely so cool. So you set them off and release them, and they give you a gift where you can change between night and day, which helps you in post game. And it's so cool just to see them finally. It's like, whoa. And all the stories and the paintings are like, I finally get to meet the dogs, Skull and Hati. And basically, once that happens, what else happens? I think, more fighting, blah, blah, blah. Trying to think. Who's this boss? Oh, I think that's just a side objective. Anyways, once you get that rescuing Skull and Hati, I think you finally go to meet Heimdall. And this was a really cool fight because it was just really cool to see the strategies you can use to defeat him. You can throw the sphere on the ground. You can throw it in his hand. You can trick him, finally use the axe. So there's many ways to defeat him, and it was so cool seeing that. And so you finally defeat Heimdall, and at the end he's saying, "You'll always be a monster." I'm like, yeah, that's very true. That's who Kratos is, and that's who he will always be. He is never going to stop being a monster. He could be a father and a monster at the same time, but he's never going to let go of his past and be the guy who he was. And so basically, there's a whole fight in Vanaheim. I know you had to fly in a flying ship and defeat a whole bunch of enemies. And so basically, you go in order to end the whole fight. Atreus actually sneaks back into Asgard and goes back to Thrud, which is actually Thor's daughter. They find Thor, and this was kind of interesting scene because it was kind of a very different one I haven't seen in gaming before, where they go into a bar and then you find someone, and then it's like, which is Thor, and it's like, well, you know what? Let's just get into a whole bar fight. And so it's not really enemies; it's just people you're just trying to survive with. And so you finally get Thor, and then you go back to Helheim because that's where not Helheim. You go back to where is it? Give me a second. Helheim. You go back to Helheim, and it's a very interesting mission. It's kind of cool. But at the end of it, because Thor's very drunk throughout this mission from the bar, and so you finally get to the end of that mission, and he finally figures out, wait, Atreus is not actually a friend. He's not working for us. He's actually sneaking behind the back. And so he goes behind Odin. They sneak back to, now I remember the rest, kind of. They sneak back to the house because he has a thing from the dwarf. I'm blanking on their names. I don't know why. Anyways, they go back to the house, and basically they figure out that Odin is actually Tyr this whole time in the house and not fighting. And so it was kind of interesting to see like the sadness after that, what they all went through, because I know they went back to Midgard and they're like, yeah, this is kind of sad because there's not much we can do. And so basically as they did that, so I'm trying to think of anything else. What was in Muspelheim? I'm trying to think, okay, blah, 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 blah. So, oh, yeah. I totally forgot about that. Anyways, so after the whole grieving process, they're like, okay, let's finish this. There's a way we could do it. So we're going to go get Surtur and Muspelheim. I'm like, no way. This is going to be so cool because Surtur, especially if you've seen Thor Ragnarok, is like huge fire, and like, this is so cool. And this mission has to be one of my favorites once it got to the second half of the mission. Oh my goodness. You finally get to meet Surtur and who he is. But you go to a place called, give me a second. The Spark of the World, and it's once you enter, it's so beautiful. It's literally the universe and the birth of the universe. So you get to see all these beautiful colors between orange and blue, and you got to see Ragnarok or Surtur become Ragnarok. You got to fight two of the hardest Valkyries, Hist and Meist. I think that's how you pronounce them, and it was so cool between that fight. And then finally, after that fight, you finally get Ragnarok, and it's so cool to see him in his not see him yet, but hear him because he's down in the depths, and he'll awaken once you sound the horn. Because you got the horn from Heimdall, and so it was kind of cool seeing that. So basically, it's time where blah blah blah. I think I'm trying to think of anything else I'm forgetting, but I don't think so. So I'm going to finish this off because I just played the ending, so I know this very well. So anyways, once you awaken that, you go back to Midgard and you prepare your army. It's kind of cool seeing all the tents of all the different soldiers. You get to see it of all the different Valkyries. What was really even cool about this is that you just had a one-on-one with Atreus and be like, you know what, this is cool. Tomorrow we might die, but it's so cool just to have you as my son and everything. And so basically this is going to freak me out because the ending is my favorite part of the game. Just because there's so many good references and everything. Anyways, they go into Tyr's temple, and Kratos talks about he didn't want this war. He came here to get away from his past, but he can't do that. Instead, he's going to be the general of the army. Once I heard this, I was like, what? That general? What? He's going back to God of War 1 of who he was, calling back the references he made to God of War 1, where in order to win a war, you have to sacrifice everything. And I'm like, dang, this is so cool. And it called back one of my favorite scenes. And like, not called back, but it was one of my favorite scenes of the game where he blew the horn and all the different, doors of the realms opened one by one by one by one by one. The music was very intense at that moment. I'm like, let's go. I'm ready. And so basically you get into it, and you saw all the different realm towers fall one by one, but you go in and fight. Again, Sindri is grieving because he just lost Brock. There we go. Now I remember them dwarf names. But they're like, yeah, let's end this. So basically, Sindri finally helps out, and it was so cool. Just to see him in action and see all the different powers between everyone. And finally, you get to the Thor fight, and it was so cool because you finally saw the full power of Thor, who he was, especially when he activated his lightning. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Anyways, I'm very sad that Thor died because he was a really cool character, but I understood why he died. It just was a sad moment. It was very fast, but it was very sad at the same time. And basically, once Thor died, you had the uprising of Odin, and it was very interesting to see Odin in this game. Just bringing a callback because very, very calm. He doesn't really yell. He's very calm about everything. And so when you saw him at his most vulnerable state, he's very angry. And so at this time, you had like all the different powers, especially when they got to the ultimate, trying to fight Odin at his most vulnerable at the very end and using all the powers. I was like, dang, everyone's kicking him out the one time. There's a very intense scene, kind of like the end of God of War 2018, where he had all the different button prompts, and I'm like, this is so cool. Anyways, you finally get to the end, and what surprised me is that you went back to Midgard, but Atreus had to make his own choice and go on his own to be the champion of the Jotnar. Basically, he had to save his people because he had the responsibility and the power as one of the last giants left to save his people. And I had no idea this was coming. Again, this is the very end of the game. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so sad. Um, and I'll get to him in a bit. But basically, after that, Kratos, after Atreus left, he went back and looked at a panel and saw what a future he could become. And I'm like, this is crazy. Kratos could have a future where everyone worshipped him. I guess he must have wanted that because that was another path he had gone. But no, everyone would have rather seen him as how would you put it? Kind of like a murderer, a monster in a way. And he was crying at that because he would rather be worshipped rather than hated. And I felt for Kratos at that time because I played every single God of War game up to this point. I'm like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy game. And he should be worshipped instead of actually a monster because it's just who he is. But that's kind of like how the games fell, is that he was portrayed as a monster. Anyways, after Atreus left, the game finally gets you the post game, and what was interesting is that Freya took over in Atreus' place, and I was kind of mad, but also I should have seen it coming too, because I really wanted Atreus to be with me on my post game adventures. When you went to Helheim, for example, you freed some jellyfish, and Atreus would have loved that and seen the voice lines from him, but instead it was Freya, and it was like, oh, I wonder if Atreus was here, what he would think. And so it was just kind of sad to see that Freya was there instead of Atreus, but I understand. A huge, huge deal. But that's my whole thing about God of War. Post-game stuff, I could talk about that, but I just wanted to go throughout the missions and talk about what I liked on every single one. All the reference they made, any hard stuff. And this is pretty much one of my favorite games of all time. It was so cool, just absolutely loving this game because it was so cool seeing the environments, all the callbacks to the original games, and just having a blast with the combat, especially Atreus and his fighting. And it was absolutely amazing to play it again and again and again. I think it's one of my top 10 most played games, and I absolutely, absolutely love it. Oh my goodness, it's so, so good. I could talk about this game forever. And so basically, this game, I give it a 10 out of 10. There's nothing bad about it. There are some boring parts, but they weren't hard at all. I mean, I could get through them, but it was just so fun just going throughout the whole game and playing it. It was an absolute adventure. I never stopped loving at one point. It was an adventure from beginning to the end. Anyways, this is my whole talk through throughout the game, what I loved through every single mission, and just what I thought about all the different adventures as you played through the game. Anyways, hopefully you guys are doing well. With lots of love and respect, I will see you guys later. Bye.